This was an online meeting held on Zoom regarding Lydney Harbour. This was held on the 11th of August 2023. I'll give you a quick introduction then of who I am really and what I'm about, where I'm from. So I set up a Facebook community group, and we try and cover like community matters. And one of our members basically posted the image of the fence that was erected down at the Harbour site, and somebody contacted me and said, look, I'll sign a petition if you set one up. So that's basically where this started from, and where I'm coming from. The intention today really is to get a clear line of communication with you guys, and obviously send this so people can have a clear, a bit of transparency really for the residents of Lydney and stuff. So, I'll leave it over to Tasha now to explain why she's here.
Hi Martin, I'm Tasha. So although I am the Mayor of Lydney, I'm here in my own personal capacity as a resident, and I'm part of the group that Dan just mentioned. I'm one of his admins. So from the council perspective, we're in recess at the moment, so I can't comment on what the council think or believe. These will be questions residents have contacted me about as a councillor, although I'm not in my council capacity today. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I presume recess finishes early September?
It does, yeah. We're back for our first full council, September the 11th. So this possibly may be on the agenda then, although I haven't actually seen the agenda yet. It's far too early for that. So I am on, like I said, I am, although I have got a council head on, I am here as Tasha Saunders,
yeah, absolutely, Tasha. Yeah, that would be good, because I think it'll be September before we start to. I can tell you a bit more about what we'll do next.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Martin.
Okay, cool. So we just got this. I'm just going to run through. I know many of the questions and things like that I'm going to ask has probably already been answered through the media, or you've sent me emails as well, Martin. So a lot of it might have been asked already. But again, we're just going to run through the sections as we go, and then just to get it all in one place, if that makes sense. So the first one really that we're going to touch on is like communication. There seemed to be a lack of communication in the instance of the posts on social media from the Harbour Master Lydney account. And there seemed to be a lot of miscommunication with the posts appearing and then later being removed. And obviously this has been much of the cause for speculation amongst a lot of the local people. So my first question really is, why did the Harbour Master post that on Facebook, that the pier was going to be permanently closed? And then obviously that post was then later removed. Why was that?
So in terms of the area which is fenced off currently, that's been fenced off, you'll probably be aware, for about 12 months. Mm-hmm. The green fence which you'll see down site today was actually a replacement of the existing fencing that was there. The reason why we upgraded to the green fence is because the Harris fencing was being moved. Because we are repairing the outer sea gates and some various other works to that part of the site, we have a duty of care effective to keep the public safe from that area. In terms of the comment on Facebook, mm-hmm. The reason why we removed it is because of the miscommunication it had caused.
Right.
And therefore that's perhaps not helpful. What we are committed to do going forwards is to engage and consult around what a long-term safety solution could be for the site.
Okay.
And the reason why I commented about the recess is because we're looking to do that probably around sort of September, October. The plan would be to effectively have some sort of community representatives come forward, so perhaps both of you and some others that have been in touch, rather than it being a wider public dropping session as such.
Okay.
Well, while you mention that, can I just bring in a quick question? It was on one of my side notes. So obviously Lydney Coastal Community Team, obviously set up by Forest Dean District Council, said that a new group was being set up to work with the EA, I called the Lydney Harbour Advisory Committee. We got invited to, I say invited, we had the email and told about it on June the 19th, which is when Farstadine Council called us all in, and it's kind of the project was handed back to you at the Environment Agency. And we was asked to apply to the Harbour Master if we wished to join that group. Has that group been set up yet, or has anyone been contacted? Because the people I know that wanted to be part of it have not received any communication about this new group.
So in terms of the LCCT, so the Lydney Coast Community Team, the reason why we almost drew that to an end is because it was in the point of Destination Lydney Harbour came to an end, so therefore it felt that that was sort of a clean break. The Harbour Advisory Committee, the reason why that has been suggested and you've been communicated with is because we think some of the people on the LCCT will be different to the Harbour Committee. The plan is still to establish the Lydney Harbour Advisory Committee, but in the context of the fencing of what we're talking about today, to start with, we'd keep the two separate.
That's fine.
Think that both will end up. The advisory committee will be the future forum of which the relevant people, like we did before, communicate.
Okay, perfect. But that, can you confirm that hasn't yet been set up? Is
Absolutely not. No, it hasn't been set up yet, but we will be looking to set it up in the coming weeks and months. We need to probably separate the two to start with, but that will be the plan.
Yeah, 100%. I was just checking it hadn't been set up and there wasn't already a group that would have been able to help go forward on this. So so just quickly on the back of that other message, also, so this page, the Lydney Harbour Masters page, which has been really informative and really good, and I actually did applaud him on that when I went down on June the 19th. Is this an official page authorised by the Environment Agency?
It's within the Environment Agency. Staff members, we use Twitter, we use Facebook. Now we set up the Facebook page because Facebook is quite an accessible forum for a lot of people. So once the Harbour Master uses it in terms of his personal role, it is a forum to communicate effectively work and activities that are going on site. So whilst it's not an official EA page, it is a communication forum we're using. The reason being is we know a lot of people aren't on Twitter and some of the other platforms versus Facebook, which is much more accessible.
That's perfect. No, thank you. That's great. It's back to Dan now.
Okay. So yeah, like how do you intend on like improving the lines of communication and the transparency to the local community? I know you mentioned potentially setting up like a committee group. Is that something that you want to push ahead with quite soon, or?
Yes, so two things then. So we'll establish the Lydney Harbour Advisory Committee. We still need to work through around what is the right representation on that, likely to include local councillors, like we probably had with the Coastal Community Team. The fencing, what the plan would be is that we would set up a short-term separate forum whereby we will engage, again, bringing relevant community representatives to talk about what happens next. So that could be the solution or the options we take beyond the construction phase where we are now.
Okay.
Brilliant. Okay. Brilliant. So also what form of communication, if this is probably actually doubling up what we just said, but what form of communication will be used in future to prevent miscommunication such as this in the future? And that's probably what you've just said, actually, isn't it?
Yeah, so specific to the Harbour, the advisory committee will be the forum, but separate to that, I've got a meeting early next week with some colleagues, and I'm starting to divide a stakeholder list of people who I've engaged over the last few days. People that are already on the existing LCCT to decide who is the best people to represent the group to talk about the peers and the issue we've had over the last couple of weeks.
Brilliant, thank you.
Just another one really is just some clarification really on what the plans are for the future of the public access on the North and South piers. Because I know there was some mention that they were going to be sort of closed on a permanent basis. I mean, has that been changed and reconsidered, or is that still going to be up for sort of consideration?
And this is where we need to improve our communication and talk with the relevant user groups, the community interest, and anyone else. Now, the piers will remain closed while the site remains a construction site, so they won't be open during that period. And that's the same duty of care we would have, or anyone would have, with any similar construction site.
Okay.
In terms of the future, we will take on board and consider the views and the opinions of different people. We also need to bring in Historic England, because anything we do in the future would be subject to a consenting process before we could actually make steps. And I think if we start to understand the different options and the different views, we can then make a more informed decision about what next.
Okay.
Now, that does not mean I can say to you that the piers will be open long term, nor can I say that they will be permanently closed. I think we need to go through this process to understand the views of the public, but also the views of people from the land side and the people from the water side, because there is a wide variety of different elements that perhaps need to be considered, which we will do in the sort of September, October time, once we've worked out who needs to be involved in that process.
Okay, brilliant.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next sort of segment really is the safety concerns. I know that some of the owners of the boats down there have expressed some concerns for the safety in the case of an emergency with the erection of the fences there. I mean, if an emergency should occur, I mean, they're saying that the fencing would slow or even prevent access. You know, if an emergency situation like an engine failure should occur. Do you have obviously risk assessments have been created for the works on the site. Was this considered at the point of creating the risk assessments, or will you be looking to do a fresh risk assessment to be created to include the safety concerns of the boat owners in case of emergencies?
Yes, so the next step as part of that wider consultation is to understand the different views. In terms of fencing on the site, that will involve consultation with emergency services, operational users of the site, because there is the differing needs. We may end up in a position whereby you have certain access to certain parts of the site, other sites may be more restricted. But I don't want to make the assumptions today on that. I think this is where we need to get the different views coming forward. The construction site as it stands, so those green fences, they will remain in place until that work has been completed, because we have a duty of care to keep the public safe from any work area, and that's no different to anything else we deliver across the agency.
Okay.
Thank you. Is the copy of the risk assessment available for the public to see? The risk assessment, sorry.
So I haven't got that information from me today, but certainly I can ask the question.
Thank you.
The process where we take in terms of risk assessment is that we looked at the changing users of the site. So we know that destination Lydney Harbour has been transformative in terms of the diversity and the amount of people that are now using the site for recreational and other purposes, which is what it was there for, and we've been really supportive of that. What we also have to do then as a landowner is to then understand how that changing user need may impact the public in terms of safety. And you'll be aware that there was a fence that was put up about sort of 12-18 months ago along the north side of the basin, because we knew that actually a lot of people enjoy that area around the cafe and the toilets.
Yes, yeah.
In terms of, say, the fencing of the piers, we have considered other sites which are similar in nature, that may be still equally as exposed, but the agent as a landowner has to make a decision around our duty of care rather than what may happen at our harbour or a pier elsewhere. In
Okay.
terms of, say, the fencing that is beyond the north side, where we look at the pier fencing, if you like, we look at a process where we have to understand, how do you reduce or eliminate a risk? Now, that's the basis we've come from, is firstly eliminating a risk, but we do need, as already explained, to just consider wider views and the public concern, but as well as the other concerns that have been raised, just to make sure that the decisions we make are transparent and they are clear as to how we've reached a certain decision.
Okay,
Yeah.
brilliant.
Okay.
You also mentioned to me that the closure of the piers were not obviously based on any incidents or accidents on the site, and they are the result of the risk assessment carried out by you guys. Do you intend on using this method of decision making for all future works and projects at the site?
So in terms of projects, each project would have its own risk assessment associated with it. You'll be aware there's other works that are currently ongoing at Lydney, and there'll be works that happen in the future, which is actually really positive. So in terms of future decisions, it's not our intention to fence the entire site, because nobody would want that, and neither do we want that. We have to try and make sure that the risk to the public is balanced, and we have to therefore make an informed decision, and a decision which we're accountable for. What we will do is, for future works going through a similar process, we will need to look at the nature of the works, the type of access, the public access, and the risks associated with that. And once we've done that, that's when we'll make an informed decision around what the best course of action is. With the Lydney Harbour Advisory Committee, there will be an improved communication line. So hopefully more of the work, like with the LCCT, the Coastal Community Team, the public will be better informed in terms of what the works we've got planned at the harbour are.
Okay, brilliant. So yeah, I mean, like a little bit more on that with the, in regards to maybe setting up sort of public meetings. Obviously, you've mentioned the advisory group and things like that. Or even like if you could maybe think or consider of publishing like a monthly newsletter that could be issued so people are made more aware of like the future plans and the works, because I think to a lot of local people this has come as quite a surprise, and they weren't aware that this was going on, you know, in the harbour area. And many have sort of vocalised to me personally that they need something to improve those communications, which I know you've touched on already. And, you know, it just provides a bit more transparency for the local residents. I mean, this is half the reason why I think the petition I set up was proved so popular in such a short space of time. And a lot of people got behind this because, you know, they felt quite angered that it just seemed that this was all going on without any knowledge of it and, you know, had no say in the matter. So I think that
yes, and I'll certainly feed the idea forward of the newsletter. The Harbour Advisory Committee, I think, again, would be a platform to have those conversations around communications too. So certainly I'll take those things on board and I'll feed them back.
Okay, brilliant.
Thank you. Would you also consider providing a periodic report to the local town council to update them what you're doing at the harbour, including timescales, plans? And that way we can use that report, feed it back to the community, put it on our notice boards, social media, web pages. Because Richard Morgan used to do the such reports when he was part of the regeneration team, and it did provide very useful. And then when we used to get queries in about the harbour, because believe it or not, people still think Lydney Town Council own the harbour. And so we have to field these complaints or concerns or opinions a lot of the time. But if we had some kind of communication or an updates periodically, it would really help us be able to do our job without hindering you guys so much.
And alongside the sort of idea of perhaps a newsletter, we can consider that. And I used to do some of those reports that we provided to yourselves.
Yeah.
Similarly, the town council would hopefully have a seat at the table in terms of the harbour committee too.
Brilliant. That'd be great. Thank you.
That's great. Yeah. So obviously the works on the site are ongoing. You've told me there's like no set date for the completion. I mean, do you have any idea of the timescale roughly? Even is it, I mean, are we looking at months, years, or longer?
So we have the sea gates, the outer sea gates are due back at the end of this month, so the end of August, and it is a really positive thing because they've been out of operation for quite a long time. Now, when we put the outer sea gates back, we have got to do some other works to the historic mechanisms that used to operate that part of the basin. So we've got a sluice that we need to reinstate, some historic engineering that we need to bring into the modern day standards.
Okay.
We will also need to look at what other works are required, firstly to make sure that we're safeguarding the future monument. As you know, it's a designated site, but also around any other works to the surfacing of that part of the harbour. So some of this will be dependent on funding, and when we have funding, we then have to decide where that funding is best utilised, and that is often done in conversation with the historic experts, so Historic England as well as the EA internal. So the reason why I struggle to give you a date is because once we've done the works to the outer harbour and the sea gates, we will then need to understand what we do next, and some of that will be depending on future budgets and priorities. So once we know more, we will be able to feed it back through the various communication routes, and we certainly will do that.
Okay, brilliant. Another thing that a lot of people have brought up to me is that on the site at the moment there seems to be a lot of sort of overgrown pathways, even including like the watchtower sculpture. It can barely be seen, to be honest. It's so overgrown down there. I said that question's come my way so much and so regular. It's been pretty much in my inbox sort of every hour since I started this campaign. And I just wondered, you know, why have these pathways and these areas been allowed to become so overgrown and sort of unkept?
So in the last 12-18 months, you've actually done more vegetation clearance than we've probably done previously, because we do recognise that parts of the site do become overgrown quite rapidly. I'm not aware that there's vegetation that is preventing access to, I'm assuming you mean the art installation down the bottom there, but if there is a mechanism to provide feedback directly through the Harbour Master's email address, which will be on site. So if people have got concerns, there's no reason why we can't clear vegetation of concern. What we are reluctant to do is manicure the site as you would say a recreational park, and I don't think perhaps people would necessarily want that due to the the natural and the nature of the site. But if there are any specific areas whereby people feel that need to be cleared, by all means, we've got a contract in place for vegetation clearance, and we can get that arranged. Okay,
so I can pass that on to the community, and obviously they can make their own contact with you guys to
Absolutely.
know, because there's specific areas that I've been informed of, and it'd be easier if that's sort of communicated directly to you. So that's brilliant.
Absolutely, yes.
I've got one question again that's come to me. So this has been a public question. Will the rubbish and waste situated be cleared up to improve the aesthetics of the area, or will this be left until completion of the ongoing work? Behind the new green fences, from what it appears, no maintenance has been done in that area for some time. The usual painting and tidying up and weeding in that area has been left to get out of control. Have you actually had to close the pier due to neglect and an unofficial dumping ground that's happened during the regeneration? That's a direct question from a member of the public.
Okay, so in terms of rubbish, I'm not sure what they mean by rubbish. I assume they mean works associated sort of items, if you like.
Yeah, it's got very unkempt. I mean, where you would normally have painted all those parts of the pier, it's all rusted. I have looked at it myself, and I've got to be honest, I felt the same. It did look like sacks of sacks and stuff have just been left there, dumped there, and even that's got weeds all grown round it. So it's obviously not being used imminently. It does look very untidy, and that's why the public it was shut off, because it had been neglected. So that was
So in terms of the comments around the sacks and things that have been dumped, I'll certainly take that feedback away with me.
Yes.
Where we're looking at things like the covers for the old mechanisms that used to be used to manage the sea gates. That's part of my comment around what happens next, because we do know that actually, beyond, say, repairing the gates and the associated mechanisms, there are parts like the covers that also need to be refurbished or replaced.
Yeah.
And that, again, because they're part of the historic monument, it does take a lot of time, because it has to be done in consultation with Historic England to make sure it's the right material and the right design. In terms of the vegetation that's currently growing between the flagstones and the grass there, again, that's something we will need to review in terms of the future use of that part of the site. And it's no way in means as to why the site has been closed. The site there is the construction site, and that's why the fence have been installed for the last 12 months.
Thank you. That's great. You've answered that. Thank you.
Again, another question from one of our community members. They've said that the fences are over 2.4 metres high, although it has been stated the fences are temporary and will be removed once the works have been completed. Many people have raised the legality aspects on the erection of the gates and fences, as in like the planning side of things, the Ancient Monument and Archaeological Act 1979 and the Scheduled Monument. Do they allow for the fences to be placed up without that site planning permission, or?
So in terms of the fencing that we installed on the North Basin, we just required consent from Historic England and gained consent for that. The same would apply to any other fence that we installed on site. The green fences that you see today are temporary. They're not keyed in the ground. They're not installed in any permanent way. So the temporary measures mean that the consenting requirements are different.
Okay.
In terms of planning over the 2.4 meters, I can't answer that today, but I will certainly ask the question.
Brilliant.
Thank you. Another question, again, a direct question. What areas of the site that you've closed off have a public right of way, for example, the piers? Do the piers have a public right of way on them?
So public right of way was raised when I was on site on Tuesday, and it's one of the questions that I've taken with me to ask that question. I don't know how that the public right of way and the access works in the context of the closure of the piers, but I will find out.
Excellent.
Thank you ever so much.
Okay, I mean that pretty much sums up like everything that I've got really for you. Obviously, I know a lot of the questions have been answered, and I know you're going to sort of chase some of the things up for me, and hopefully you can feed that back to me at a later date. I've got a few questions from the community. I have literally got 4 minutes left on this Zoom call until it potentially kicks me out. So
be quick then.
Yeah. Somebody's put, why was a taller fence put up only a few meters from the lower fence that's been erected on the site? This seems to be a waste of money, or did the plans change after the construction of that smaller fence?
So if we're talking about the fence around the basin, which is the permanent fence, it would just be subject to what we've talked about today in terms of our review of public safety on site. If we're referring to the lower Harris fence, it's solely because they were being moved. So that's why we replaced them with the green version you see today.
Okay, brilliant. Another question again. I said we might have covered some of this, but would there not be the possibility of installing a waist-high barrier to be erected at the edge of the pier to enable the opening of the pier? If there has to be a fence, then for simple continuation of the current basin fence with sprung gates. The horizontal wires are perfect for keeping kids and dogs at bay. Given that, the plans to put fencing around the basin had to be scrapped, and instead a white line was painted as a warning. What makes you think that putting any kind of fence on the pier will get past Historic England and planning?
So couple of things there. So the white line was the original mechanism that was put in place to identify the edge. The white line doesn't meet the current changing user needs of the site, which is why we've seen the change of the fencing on site. And this comes back to the conversation we've had this afternoon in terms of the wider consultation with Historic England and the various options I think we need to evaluate with the relevant stakeholders that would be involved in that next conversation.
Okay, and another quick one as well. Somebody's mentioned, the railings that have been put up around the locks. Why can't this be replicated? I mean, you've sort of already answered that. And
again, that could be an option, but like I already mentioned in your first question or the question before, is around the Historic England, the planning requirements, the sensitive nature of the site, the style, the location, and what we do when and what is most appropriate. That's the process we'll go through next.
Okay, brilliant.
Very quickly, hoping this gets in time. Some people have raised that this is restricting their access to use the area to fish. Do you have any comment to make on that?
Again, the site's fenced off due to the construction works. In terms of the fishing requirements, by all means, we'll consider all those different views when we meet next to discuss that wider access requirement.
Okay, brilliant.
Okay. I think you've probably covered the other ones I've got. Have you got any left, Dan?
Just another little one was people are asking why there was no public consultation on the works.
And I think that comes back to sort of the first conversation we started with today. We recognise that actually communication is really important, and perhaps the reason why we've ended up even speaking today is because actually our communication should be better. So consequently, that's why we're looking at the best way to do that. We will be in touch over the next couple of weeks with what we're doing next. We'll include both of your details on that, and also if there's anybody else that you feel could represent sort of different views, we're happy to take those names on board. I have looked at who we previously engaged with as part of the LCCT, just to make sure we've got that broad spectrum of different views and opinions, which I think is important.
So unfortunately, we had run out of time with the 40-minute Zoom session, but it was very vital in this meeting to be able to make that form of communication to something that we can build on that relationship so we can move forward, maintain that contact, maintain that transparency, and pass the information on to the residents of Lydney and the Lydney community.